The screen of my banking app blurred through my tears, zero balance. My entire retirement, every penny I'd saved for my surgery, was gone. Across the patio, Derek laughed, clinking his beer against Linda's. They thought I was helpless. They didn't know the forensic audit had already begun. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The heat of the mid-July afternoon felt oppressive, a heavy blanket of humidity that made the air thick and hard to breathe. But the cold that washed over me had nothing to do with the weather. It started in my fingertips, a numbness that tingled and then went dead, before shooting up my arms and settling deep in my chest. I was standing in the shade of the old oak tree in my mother's backyard, the same tree I had climbed as a child, the same tree where we were currently hosting the annual family reunion. The sounds of the party, the clinking of silverware, the splash of children jumping into the pool, the low hum of conversation, seemed to warp and distort, sounding like they were coming from underwater. I looked down at my phone again. I blinked hard, trying to clear the black spots dancing in my vision. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the heat was messing with the screen. I refreshed the page. The little circle spun for a second, a mocking little animation, before the numbers settled back onto the screen. Available balance, $0. I felt my knees buckle. I reached out, grabbing the rough bark of the oak tree to steady myself. My other hand flew to my mouth to stifle a sob that was clawing its way up my throat. This wasn't just mad money. This wasn't a vacation fund. That account held $350,000. It was the accumulation of 25 years of working 60-hour weeks as a forensic accountant. It was the safety net I had built after my divorce. More importantly, it was the money for the spinal surgery I needed in 3 months. A surgery that my insurance had deemed elective, despite the fact that some mornings I couldn't feel my toes. I tapped the Recent Transactions tab, my finger shaking so badly I hit the wrong button twice. Finally, it loaded. Transfer to D&L Holdings LLC, authorized by J. Anderson. D&L Derek and Linda. My stomach turned over. I felt physically sick, the nausea rolling through me in violent waves. I looked up from the screen, my eyes scanning the crowd of relatives until they landed on the patio. There they were. Linda, my younger sister, was wearing a new sundress, something silk and expensive that shimmered in the sunlight. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a glass of champagne in her hand. Beside her stood Derek, her husband. He was leaning against the railing, gesturing broadly with a cigar in one hand and a tumbler of scotch in the other, holding court with a group of our cousins. He looked flushed, happy, and utterly without a care in the world. They looked like people who had just won the lottery. I watched Derek slap one of our cousins on the back, his laugh booming across the yard. It was a sound I usually found annoying, but today it sounded sinister. It sounded like theft. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and smash his scotch glass out of his hand. I wanted to grab Linda by the shoulders and shake her until she explained how she could do this to me. But I couldn't move. The shock pinned me to the spot. I looked at the transaction timestamp. Yesterday, 4:15 p.m. Yesterday, while I was driving down here, stuck in traffic for 6 hours to make it to this reunion. Yesterday, while I was stopping to pick up Mom's favorite cake from that bakery 3 towns over. They had been draining my life away. Jane, you okay, honey? I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. I turned to see Caroline, our mother, standing there with a tray of deviled eggs. At 72, she was still the matriarch of the family, frail but sharp-eyed. She looked at me with concern, her brow furrowed. You look pale, she said, stepping closer. Is it your back again? You need to sit down. I looked at her kind, worried face. If I told her right now, the reunion would end in chaos. It would kill her. She worshipped the idea of family unity. She had no idea that her youngest daughter and son-in-law were criminals. Just the heat, Mom, I managed to whisper, my voice sounding raspy and foreign to my own ears. I just need a minute. Go inside, sweetie. Get some water, she urged, patting my arm before moving off to serve the guests. I watched her go, then looked back at Derek and Linda. Derek was now pointing at the brand new SUV parked in the driveway, a vehicle they had arrived in, claiming it was a rental. I felt the tears finally spill over, hot and stinging on my cheeks. But as the first tear hit the SC Rien of my phone, something inside me shifted. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It was the same feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in a ledger, the moment the numbers stopped being random and started forming a pattern of deceit. They had stolen my future. They had stolen my health. But as I stared at Derek's smug, sweaty face, I realized that for all their arrogance, they had made a fatal error. They thought they were stealing from a sister, a pushover, the nice one. They forgot they were stealing from a woman who hunted financial criminals for a living. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself, but as I wiped my eyes, I knew one thing: I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to take everything. I retreated to the guest bathroom on the first floor, locking the door with a trembling hand. The silence was a relief, though the muffled bass of the music outside still vibrated through the walls. I sat on the closed toilet lid, putting my head between my knees, trying to force oxygen into my lungs. Breathe, Jane, breathe. I needed to assess the damage. I needed to be clinical. I opened the banking app again. I took a screenshot of the zero balance. I took a screenshot of the transfer details. Then, I opened my email. There were no alerts, no notifications from the bank asking for confirmation. That meant they had my passwords. They had my security questions. Ow. My mind raced back to 3 months ago. Linda had come to stay with me for a week while Derek was between ventures, and they were having marital trouble. I had been heavily medicated for my back pain, often sleeping for 12 hours at a time. I remembered waking up one afternoon to find Linda in my home office, sitting at my desk. "Just checking my email, Janie. My phone died," she had said, flashing that bright, innocent smile that had gotten her out of trouble since we were children. I had trusted her. She was my sister. I had gone back to sleep. I stared at the bathroom tiles, a wave of self-loathing crashing over me. I was a professional. I audited Fortune 500 companies. I tracked hidden assets in offshore accounts for divorce settlements. And yet, I had left my own digital life wide open to the people closest to me. I stood up and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my skin sallow. I looked like a victim. "Stop it," I hissed at my reflection. "You are not a victim, you are the auditor." I unlocked the door and stepped back out into the hallway. I had to go back out there. I had to play the part. If they suspected I knew, they might move the money again, hide it somewhere I couldn't reach before I could freeze it. I walked into the kitchen. The air conditioning was blasting, a stark contrast to the heat outside. Linda was there, refilling her champagne glass. "Jane," she chirped, spinning around. Her eyes were glassy, a little too bright. "Where have you been? You're missing the toasts. Derek is about to give a speech." "Just a headache," I said, keeping my voice level. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to grab her wrist and demand answers. "Is that new?" I pointed to the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. It caught the light, sparkling mockingly. Linda froze for a microsecond. Her eyes darted to the bracelet, then back to me. "Oh, this? No, it's a knockoff, cubic zirconia. You know me, bargain hunter." She giggled, but the sound was brittle. She was lying. I knew real diamonds when I saw them. That was a $5,000 bracelet. My back surgery money was currently wrapped around her wrist. "It's beautiful," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Derek must be doing well with his new business. "Oh, amazing," Linda gushed, relaxing now that she thought I bought the lie. "This new venture, it's really taking off. Tech stuff, you know, algorithms." "Algorithms," I repeated. "Right." "Come on," she hooked her arm through mine. "You have to hear his speech." She dragged me outside. I felt like a prisoner being led to the gallows. We walked onto the patio just as Derek climbed onto a sturdy garden chair, raising his glass. "Family," he bellowed, his face red with drink and heat. "I just want to say, it's a blessing to be here, to be able to provide, to be the rock." I watched Caroline, my mother, beaming up at him. She loved Derek. She thought he was a charming rogue who just had bad luck. She didn't see the predator underneath. "This year has been hard," Derek continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical hush. "But we turned it around. Linda and I, we've been blessed, and we want to share that blessing. Tonight, the catering is on us, and," he paused for dramatic effect, "we're taking everyone to the lake house next weekend, all expenses paid." A cheer went up from the cousins and aunts. My stomach twisted. He was buying their affection with my money. He was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch, using the funds I needed to be able to walk without pain. I stood in the back, leaning against the siding of the house. Derek's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. For a second, his grin faltered. He looked challenging, smug. He raised his glass specifically in my direction. "Even you, Jane, you work too hard. You pinch every penny. You need to learn to live a little, right?" The crowd laughed. Good old Jane, the boring accountant, the miser. I smiled back. I raised my empty hand in a mock toast. "Enjoy it, Derek," I thought, the cold rage settling into a focused beam of hatred. "Drink the expensive scotch. Wear the new watch, because you've forgotten one crucial thing." He had transferred the money to an LLC, a business account, and because of my job, I had access to a federal database that flagged suspicious transfers to shell companies in real time if I flagged them as fraudulent. But more importantly, he didn't know about the tripwire I had installed on my accounts years ago after a client had been defrauded. It was a silent tracker. I didn't just know the money was gone. I knew exactly where it was sitting, down to the routing number. He thought the money was his, but he was just holding it for me, and the interest payments he was about to owe would be paid in years of his life. To understand why this betrayal felt like a physical knife in my gut, you have to understand the history. You have to understand the decades of cleanup duty I had performed for Linda and Derek. I was the older sister by 10 years. When our father died, I was 22 and Linda was 12. Caroline fell apart. She retreated into a fog of grief that lasted for years. I stepped up. I worked 2 jobs to pay the mortgage. I put myself through night school to get my CPA, then my forensic certification. I bought Linda her prom dress. I paid for her first car. I paid for her second car when she wrecked the first one while driving high. I was the fixer, the safety net. When Linda met Derek 10 years ago, I tried to be happy for her. He was charming, in a used car salesman sort of way. He had big dreams and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He called himself a serial entrepreneur. First, it was a craft brewery. I loaned them $20,000 for startup costs. The brewery failed because Derek drank more of the product than he sold and forgot to file for a liquor license renewal. I never saw that money again. Then it was the luxury dog grooming van. Another $10,000 from me. That ended when Derek backed the van into a client's Lexus. Then came the crypto phase, the flipping houses phase, the dropshipping phase. Through it all, I was there. I paid their rent when they were facing eviction. I paid for Linda's dental work. I was the one they called at 2:00 a.m., crying, promising they would change, promising they just needed one last bridge loan. And I gave it, because I promised Dad on his deathbed I would look after them. But 3 years ago, I stopped. My back started to give out. The discs in my lumbar spine were degenerating. The pain was constant, a grinding, electric agony that made sitting for long periods torture. I told them, "No more, I need to save for myself now. I need this surgery." Linda had cried. She called me selfish. She told Mom I was hoarding wealth while they were starving. That was the context. That was the wound they had just poured salt into. I watched Derek now, circulating through the party. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, the fabric straining against his bulk. He had upgraded his usual cheap beer for a bottle of Blue Label he must have brought with him. He cornered my cousin Mike near the cooler. I moved closer, pretending to examine a flower bush, straining to listen. "It's a sure thing, Mike," Derek was saying, his voice low and urgent. "I'm telling you, the returns are astronomical. I put in, let's just say, a significant amount of capital yesterday, and it's already doubled." He was lying. He was trying to scam Mike now, too. "What exactly is the business, Derek?" Mike asked, looking skeptical. "High-frequency trading arbitrage," Derek said, using buzzwords he clearly didn't understand. "I have a system, a proprietary algorithm." I clenched my fists. There was no algorithm. There was just my spinal surgery money sitting in an account he controlled. Derek turned and saw me. He didn't look guilty. He looked emboldened. He excused himself from Mike and sauntered over to me, rocking back on his heels. "Jane," he said, blowing a cloud of cigar smoke into the space between us. "You look tired. You really should let loose. Have a drink." "I'm fine, Derek," I said, my voice steady. "Just admiring the new car. Must have cost a fortune to rent." He laughed, a wet, guttural sound. "Rental? Please, we bought it. Cash. Sometimes you have to treat yourself, right? Can't take it with you." "Cash." I repeated. "That's impressive, considering you asked Mom for gas money last month." His eyes narrowed. The jovial mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the nasty, entitled man beneath. "Things change, Jane. Fortune favors the bold. You sit in your little office, crunching numbers for the man, saving your pennies. Me, I make moves. I take what I deserve." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He reeked of expensive scotch and cheap cologne. "We needed it more than you," he sneered. My heart stopped. He wasn't even denying it. He was confessing, right to my face, because he was so arrogant he thought I wouldn't do anything. He thought I was too afraid of upsetting Mom, too afraid of causing a scene. "What did you say?" I asked, trembling not with fear, but with the effort of not striking him. "You heard me," he grinned, stepping back and spreading his arms wide. "We're family, Jane. What's yours is ours. Besides, you're single, no kids. Who are you saving it for? The cats." He laughed again, a sound that grated against my soul, and turned back to the party. "Linda, babe, you bring me another drink." I watched him walk away. He thought he had won. He thought he had asserted his dominance over the spinster sister-in-law. He had no idea that he had just given me the motive. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police would take hours, maybe days, to understand the complexity of the wire fraud. They would treat it as a civil matter between family members. No, I needed something faster. I needed something nuclear. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I hadn't called in 2 years. A man who owed me a favor for keeping him out of federal prison during an audit of his logistics company. Detective Miller, Fraud Division. I pressed call. "Hello," his voice was gruff. "Miller," I said, walking away from the party toward the quiet of the front driveway. "It's Jane Anderson, you owe me." "Jane," he sounded surprised. "Everything okay?" "No," I said, looking back at the house where Derek was laughing. "I have a priority 1 wire fraud case, identity theft, grand larceny. The perpetrators are currently located at my address." And Miller. "Yeah. I don't just want them arrested, I want a show." I hung up the phone with Detective Miller and stood in the driveway, the gravel crunching softly beneath my orthopedic sneakers. The summer air was still heavy, but the suffocating feeling in my chest had been replaced by a cold, calculating rhythm. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating with the steady, heavy thud of a war drum. I walked to my car, a sensible 4-year-old sedan that Derek had made fun of when I arrived. "Still driving that relic, Jane?" I popped the trunk. Hidden beneath a blanket and a first aid kit was my work bag. It was a heavy-duty, fireproof briefcase containing my encrypted laptop, a portable hotspot, and hard drives containing the backups of my entire life. I didn't open it there. I needed power, and I needed a secure connection. I slipped back into the house through the side door, bypassing the kitchen where Linda was likely still guzzling champagne, and made my way to the small study my father used to use. It was a dusty room, filled with old encyclopedias and the smell of stale pipe tobacco. It was the only room in the house with a hardline Ethernet port. I locked the door, I plugged in, I booted up. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the darkroom. I wasn't just Jane the sister anymore. I was Jane Anderson, senior forensic auditor. I cracked my knuckles, wincing slightly as a spasm of pain shot through my lower back, a sharp reminder of exactly what they had stolen from me. That pain was fuel. First, I accessed the bank's back-end logs. Since I had set up the family trust years ago, I still had administrative privileges on the network architecture used by the local credit union where Mom banked, and where, stupidly, I had linked my savings account for emergency transfers to help Mom. That was the weak link. I traced the login. Device ID, iPhone 15 Pro Max. User, Linda A. Location, GPS coordinates mother's address. Time, yesterday, 4:12 p.m. They hadn't even been clever about it. Linda had used her own phone. She must have guessed my password, likely a variation of a childhood pet's name or a significant date. I cursed myself for my complacency. I handled millions of dollars in corporate fraud cases, yet I had secured my personal life with the digital equivalent of a screen door. But then I went deeper. I followed the money. $350,000, transferred to D&L Holdings, LLC. I pulled up the state business registry. D&L Holdings was registered 3 months ago. Registered agent, Derek Miller. I ran a credit check on the LLC. It was a ghost ship. No revenue, no assets, but it did have activity. I pulled the transaction history for the receiving account, which, thanks to a subpoena I had read for a different case involving the same bank, I could essentially mirror view through a shared interbanking fraud alert system I had access to. It was a gray area legally, but I didn't care. What I saw made my blood run cold. They hadn't invested the money. They hadn't put it into a high-yield account. Transaction yesterday, 5:00 p.m. Wire transfer to Global Gaming Interactive, $50,000. Transaction yesterday, 5:15 p.m. Payment to Prestige Auto Leasing, $85,000 full buyout. Transaction yesterday, 5:30 p.m. Wire transfer to Vegas Sands Debt Consolidation, $120,000. I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over the mouse. In less than 24 hours, they had blown through nearly $260,000. The SUV in the driveway wasn't a rental. It was bought with my spine. The gambling debts Derek had been hiding were paid with my retirement. But then I found the smoking gun. The piece of leverage that shifted this from a tragic family dispute to a federal crime. Among the transactions was a deposit of $5,000 into an account labeled C. Anderson Care Fund. They had moved a tiny fraction back into Mom's account. Why? To make it look like a family management transfer, to muddy the waters. But in doing so, they had triggered a federal structuring alert because Mom's account was technically linked to her Social Security payments. By moving stolen funds through an account receiving federal benefits, they had just committed wire fraud involving a government-protected entity. I sat back, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes. I didn't just have proof of theft, I had proof of money laundering. I pulled out a USB drive and began downloading everything. The chat logs, the IP addresses, the bank transfers, the credit reports. I built a dossier in real time. My phone buzzed, a text from Detective Miller. I'm 20 minutes out. I'm bringing a warrant based on the digital evidence you just forwarded. Do not engage until we arrive. These situations can turn volatile. I looked at the text, do not engage. I looked at the clock, 20 minutes. I couldn't just sit here. If they sensed something was wrong, they might try to transfer the remaining $90,000. I needed to freeze them. I needed to keep them occupied. I needed to make them confess in front of witnesses so that when the police kicked that door down, there would be no, it was a misunderstanding, defense. I closed the laptop, smoothed my skirt, and stood up. The pain in my back was screaming, a hot poker adjacent to my spine. I swallowed 2 extra-strength Tylenol Dry. Time to join the party, I whispered. The sun had begun to dip below the tree line, casting long, distorted shadows across the backyard. The humidity had broken slightly, replaced by a warm, gentle breeze that smelled of charcoal and jasmine. It was a perfect evening for a family reunion. It was a perfect evening for an ambush. I walked out onto the patio. The mood was boisterous. Derek was holding court at the head of the long picnic table, recounting a story about a business trip to Macau that I now knew was a gambling binge where he likely lost the money he was now paying back with mine. Linda was sitting next to him, picking at a plate of potato salad, her diamond bracelet clicking against the table. I walked straight to the empty chair directly across from them. I didn't get food. I didn't get a drink. I just sat down, folded my hands on the plastic tablecloth, and stared at Derek. He didn't notice at first. He was too busy lying. So the VIP host comes over, right? And he says, "Mr. Miller, your table is ready." And I tell you, the look on these guys' faces. He trailed off as he felt the weight of my gaze. He looked at me, a piece of brisket halfway to his mouth. "Jane," he said, chewing slowly, "back from the dead, you look like you saw a ghost." "Not a ghost," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter like a razor wire. "Just a ledger." The table went quiet. My cousins, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, stopped eating. Mom looked up from the end of the table, smiling uncertainly. "Jane, honey, did you get enough to eat?" "I'm not hungry, Mom," I said, never breaking eye contact with Derek. "I'm just curious. Derek, I was wondering if you could give me some advice." Derek smirked, leaning back, the plastic chair creaking under his weight. "Financial advice from the master of industry. Sure, Jane. Shoot. Maybe I can help you grow that little savings account of yours." "It's about banking regulations," I said. Hypothetically, if someone were to transfer $350,000 from a private savings account to an LLC, would they need to declare that as income immediately, or could they write it off as a gift? The color drained from Linda's face so fast I thought she might faint. She dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Derek froze. His eyes darted to Linda, then back to me. The smirk didn't let Ave his face, but it became rigid, like a mask made of wax. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "We're eating dinner, Jane, don't be a bore." "It's just that I saw a fascinating transaction yesterday," I continued, my voice raising just enough to carry to the cousins at the next table. "At 4:15 p.m., from an account ending in 8904, to an entity called D&L Holdings." I leaned forward. "That stands for Derek and Linda, doesn't it?" Linda let out a strangled sound, something between a sob and a cough. "Jane, stop it, not here." "Not here?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Why not? We're family. Derek said it himself. What's mine is yours, right?" Derek slammed his hand on the table. The plates rattled. "That's enough," he barked. "You're drunk, Jane, or you're on those painkillers again. You're making a scene." "I haven't had a drop to drink," I said calmly. "And yes, I am on painkillers, because I have a degenerative disc disease, a condition I was planning to have surgery for in September, a surgery that costs exactly the amount you stole." "Stole?" Mom's voice trembled from the end of the table. "Jane, what are you saying? Who stole what?" "Tell her, Derek," I said, pointing a finger at him. "Tell Mom how you paid for that SUV. Tell her how you paid off your gambling debts in Vegas. Tell her why my retirement fund is currently sitting at 0. Derek stood up, towering over the table. He was trying to use his size to intimidate me, a tactic he had used on Linda for years. "You're delusional. I made that money trading. Crypto, I have the charts." You have a wire transfer receipt authorized by a stolen password, I countered, standing up to meet him. I ignored the screaming pain in my back. Adrenaline was a powerful anesthetic. I saw the payments, Derek. Global Gaming Interactive. Prestige Auto, you didn't invest it. You spent it in 24 hours. You're jealous, Derek shouted, spit flying from his mouth. He looked around at the family, spreading his hands. She's jealous. She sees us doing well, seeing us happy, and she can't stand it. She's trying to ruin the reunion because she's a bitter, lonely old woman. I have the IP logs, Derek, I shouted back, my voice finally cracking with the sheer magnitude of my rage. I know it was done from this house. I know Linda used her phone. Liar, Linda shrieked, jumping up. I would never. She looked at Derek, panic in her eyes. Derek, make her stop. Sit down, Jane, Derek growled, stepping around the table toward me. His fists were clenched. Sit down and shut your mouth before I throw you out of my house. It's Mom's house, I said, standing my ground, and you're not throwing anyone out. Watch me, he sneered. He reached out to grab my arm. Don't touch her. It was Mom. She had risen from her chair, looking smaller and frailer than I had ever seen her, but her eyes were blazing. She walked over to us, her hands shaking. Derek, sit down, she ordered. Caroline, she's lying, Derek said, his voice switching instantly to a wheedling, manipulative tone. She's confusing things. She's high on her meds. I'm telling you, I made a big score in the market. I was going to surprise everyone with a trip. With my money, I interrupted. Mom, listen to me. He drained my account, the surgery money, it's all gone. Mom looked from me to Derek, then to Linda. Linda was weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. That was the tell. Mom knew Linda's crying. She knew the cry of guilt. Linda, Mom asked softly, is it true? Linda looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. Mom, we were going to pay it back. I swear. Derek said it was just a loan. He said the investment would double in a week and we'd put it back before Jane even noticed. The admission hung in the air like smoke. A loan, I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You don't steal a password for a loan, Linda. You don't authorize a transfer without asking for a loan. That's called embezzlement. Derek turned on Linda. Shut up, you stupid cow, shut up. The mask was fully off now. The charming brother-in-law was gone. This was a desperate, cornered animal. Don't you speak to my daughter that way, Mom snapped, stepping between Derek and Linda. Oh, save it, Caroline, Derek spat, pacing back and forth on the patio. You're all the same, ungrateful. I try to elevate this family. I try to bring some class, some wealth into this dump. And this is the thanks I get? Accusations. He whirled on me. You think you're so smart, Jane? With your little degree and your little job, you don't know anything about the real world. In the real world, you take what you can get. And guess what? It's gone. The money is gone, I spent it. And you can't prove a damn thing was theft. Linda gave me the password. She's your sister. It's a domestic dispute. The police won't touch it. He grinned, a terrifying, manic expression. So go ahead, call the cops. They'll file a report and leave. And by the time you sue me, I'll be bankrupt again. You'll never see a dime. He was right about one thing. Usually, the police hated these cases. They were messy. They were he said, she said. But he had forgotten who I was. You're right, Derek, I said softly. Civil suits take years. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single piece of paper I had printed in the study. But federal wire fraud doesn't. I held up the paper. This is the transaction record for the $5,000 you transferred back to Mom's account this morning. Mom receives Social Security disability. That makes her account a federally protected financial instrument. By moving stolen funds through it, you triggered a mandatory FBI flag. Derek's eyes widened. He stopped pacing. I didn't call the local sheriff, Derek, I continued, taking a step toward him. I called the fraud division, and I didn't just report a theft. I reported a structuring scheme to launder money through a senior citizen's federal benefits account. You're bluffing, he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked at the driveway. He looked at the keys to the SUV sitting on the table. "Linda," he said urgently, "get in the car." "What?" Linda blinked, confused. "Get in the car, we're leaving." He grabbed the keys. "You can't leave," I said. "I've already sent the digital packet to the district attorney. If you leave now, it becomes flight from prosecution. That adds 5 years to the sentence." "I don't care," Derek screamed. He grabbed Linda's arm, dragging her toward the driveway. "Move." "No," Linda screamed, pulling back. "I'm not going. You said it was legal. You said Jane wouldn't mind." "I said get in the car." He raised his hand as if to strike her. "Derek," Mom screamed. I moved. I didn't think about my back. I didn't think about the pain. I just saw him threatening my family. I lunged forward, placing myself between him and Linda. "You are done," I hissed, staring up into his sweating, red face. "You are finished." He shoved me, hard. I flew backward, my feet tangling in the patio chair. I hit the concrete with a sickening crunch. A bolt of lightning-white pain exploded in my spine, blinding me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move my legs. "Jane," Mom screamed. I lay on the ground, staring up at the darkening sky. Through the haze of pain, I saw Derek scrambling toward the SUV. He was abandoning Linda. He was running. He fumbled with the door handle, looking over his shoulder. "You won't mind what's coming next," I wheezed, repeating the words I had thought earlier, though I couldn't hear myself say them. And then it happened. The sound that shook the house wasn't thunder. It was the synchronized slam of 4 heavy car doors closing at once. Derek froze, his hand still on the handle of the silver SUV. He looked toward the end of the long driveway, his eyes widening in disbelief. Blocking the exit were 2 unmarked black sedans and a local police cruiser, its blue and red lights cutting through the twilight gloom. "Derek Miller," a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Step away from the vehicle, put your hands in the air." Derek didn't move. He stood there, paralyzed, looking between the police and the woods behind the house. For a second, I thought he was going to run for it. He looked wild, desperate, a rat trapped in a corner. "Do it now," the voice commanded. Slowly, Derek raised his hands. The keys to the SUV, the symbol of his stolen success, dangled from his pinky finger before dropping into the gravel with a pathetic clink. I tried to sit up, but my legs wouldn't obey. Mom was kneeling beside me, stroking my hair, tears streaming down her face. "Don't move, baby, don't move. The ambulance is coming." "I'm okay, Mom," I gritted out, though the pain was radiating in waves that made the world swim. "Watch, just watch." Detective Miller, no relation to Derek, thank God, walked up the driveway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He wasn't wearing a suit, he was wearing a tactical vest. He looked grim. He walked straight up to Derek, who was now trembling visibly. "Derek Miller, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and money laundering," Miller recited, his voice calm and professional. He spun Derek around and slammed him against the hood of the SUV, the very car bought with my spine. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "Linda Anderson," Miller said, looking over at my sister. Linda was sobbing hysterically, clinging to the patio railing. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was going to spend it. He said he was investing it for her." "You can explain that to the judge," Miller said. He signaled to a female officer. "Cuff her." "No, Mom, Jane, tell them," Linda shrieked as the officer pulled her hands behind her back. I looked at my sister. I loved her. I had protected her my whole life, but she had given him the knife. She had held me down while he cut me open. "I can't help you, Linda," I whispered, the words lost in the chaos but clear in my heart. "Not this time." As they dragged Derek past the patio, he locked eyes with me one last time. He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked small. He looked like exactly what he was, a failure who had tried to steal a life he hadn't earned. "You ruined us," he spat at me. "You ruined the family." "No, Derek," I said, my voice gaining strength as the adrenaline flooded back. "I just audited it." The flashing lights painted the house in strokes of red and blue as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. The loud bang that had started this nightmare, the slamming of a door, was mirrored now by the final, definitive slam of the police car door. It was over. The recovery room was quiet, smelling of antiseptic and floor wax. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting stripes on the white sheets. It had been 3 days since the reunion. The fall on the patio had herniated another disc, accelerating the need for surgery from urgent to emergency. I woke up groggy, a dull ache in my back but miraculously feeling in my toes. I wiggled them, left big toe, right big toe. I smiled. The door opened and Mom walked in. She looked tired, aged by 10 years in the last 72 hours, but her eyes were clear. She was holding a cup of terrible hospital coffee. "Hi, sweetie," she said, sitting in the chair next to the bed. "Doctor says the surgery went perfectly. You're going to walk again, better than before." "And the bill?" I asked, my forensic brain never fully turning off. "Covered," Mom said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "Detective Miller came by yesterday. He found the rest of the money." She took a sip of coffee, her hand trembling slightly. "They froze the accounts. They seized the SUV. They seized the jewelry. They're liquidating Derek's assets, what little there were. Miller says you'll get about 80% back immediately. The rest, well, we'll get it from restitution over time." "And Linda?" I asked. Mom looked out the window. "She's out on bail. I put the house up." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "She's at the house. She's not allowed to leave. And she's not allowed to talk to Derek. He's still in holding. No bail. The federal charges stuck, Jane. They found other things, other scams. You weren't the first person he stole from." "I figured," I murmured. "Linda is broken," Mom said softly. "She finally sees him for what he is. She found his second phone, the one with the dating apps, the one with the texts to other women he was spending your money on." I closed my eyes. It was a hollow victory. My sister's life was in ruins. My mother was heartbroken. "But she's safe," Mom said, reaching out to take my hand. "She's away from him. And you saved us, Jane. If you hadn't stopped him, he would have drained my account next. He would have taken the house." She squeezed my hand. "You didn't just save your money. You saved our home." I looked at my mother, then down at my toes, wiggling under the sheet. I thought about the empty account, the betrayal, the look on Derek's face when the cuffs clicked. It had cost me everything to build that safety net, and it had nearly cost me my ability to walk to defend it. But as I lay there, feeling the warmth of the sun and the steady beat of my own heart, I realized something. Money could be earned again, spines could be fixed, but the truth was priceless. Derek was facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Linda was facing probation and a long, hard road to redemption. And I was going to physical therapy. Then I was going back to work. Because there are a lot of Dereks out there, and someone has to catch them.